Noah Nishihara reads Jang and Quack, Microsoft Corporation and Jang, Reflections on Life and Ancestors. I heard from my mom that she read and deleted the message from your mom to my Skype account, her phone, my account, while she was trying to call my dad. It apparently said 1, I'd be better off not calling you. 2, if I've got anything stressful, I can talk to your mom. Also, hearing my mom explain it and then going and checking Skype to find no trace of it, left there, reminded me that I did send random emoticons via SMS to your phone to use up yet another prepaid allocation of credit, totaling $5. It may have woken you up in the middle of the night, depending on the status of your phone, but in any case I apologize for my very disruptive conduct. Rest assured, I no longer have any prepaid SIMs with international unlimited calling capability. I do like to text you every now and then on Discord, however. Also, a little bit of information on Discord Sapari community and its relationship with me. Essentially, it is a diverse group of people who like the Sapari chat world, pretty much VR, running on a software system which Sony created in 1995 to 98, based on VRML, C++, and Java. It didn't really get mainstream adoption, but it did involve many university projects like distance education, disability or hospital children, maintaining social activities, and online shopping malls in 3D. Sapari is just one world of little importance. I first played it offline in 2004, and subsequently continued to use it intermittently until the Windows 98 2nd edition VAIO laptop that contained it stopped booting completely in 2010. The actual servers ran from 1997 to 2003. Every now and then I would research a bit about Sapari, most notably in 2013, 2015, 2017. I uncovered the most information and materials in 2017. I contacted pretty much every key individual involved in VRML, but in particular the researchers or engineers at Sony. At the time I wanted to gain the source code, as I thought it would assist me in learning programming, given my boundless enthusiasm for this thing. I also wanted to gain the non-evaluation versions of the server software, so that I could run the servers. In late 2020, I searched Sapari as I had spare time. I found a YouTube video uploaded just a few days previously, and entered this Discord Sapari community. I had anticipated that foreigners would be the ones to revive Sapari, and it had come true. I noticed that most of the people were in this out of nostalgia, a liking for the obscure, retro, and archiving. I was, for a while, continuously astonished at how much they apparently knew. For I thought that I was the only person who had ever done so much to revive Sapari. But I later came to realize that I had published most of the primary sources I had amassed in 2017 on a blogspot or blogger site, based on what was there and possibly infected with my enthusiasm back in 2017. They quickly started running several servers and were soon digging deeper into the web archive. Sapari community, in other words, originates from my blogs and numerous postings in other unrelated sites. The official version is that a user called Catface posted a GIF on SatoCord, and some users jumped on it and began researching and left to create a Sapari community. To date, I do not believe they would have gotten this far or created a separate channel without my blogs. You can only do so much if all you have is a GIF and some sparse, old fansite information of little use. They built up their user base very slowly over late 2020, but in 2017 I was just one person. I frequently view Sapari community as a continuation of my projects and goals. I see myself as the originator. The daily management, of course, of the Discord server is done by others. Recently, the servers were patched to enable not 3 or 12 users, but 255 players concurrently in one world. The server will slow down at 100 or so, though. It is like how Galileo had Newton standing on him, while Newton had Einstein standing on his shoulders. Sappery and such childish things can hit with audiences in inconceivable ways. Back in 2019, on the 3rd of May, I found reports or transcripts of Grandpa's court proceedings, and one of Uncle's as well. It makes for interesting reading, considering his lack of evidence, misunderstandings of the different way that courts work in Australia, in the common law jurisdiction, and China, the civil law, etc. Particularly relevant is that the judges on the High Court included Justice McHugh and Justice Kirby. In mid-2019, I walked with the retired Justice Kirby to the law school building and brought up a few topics. First one was lamenting the lack of more active involvement in common law courts, which Grandpa had expected. Two, asking him what avenues there were to restrict misuse of involuntary incarceration into mental health hospitals, the loophole which continues to exist in New South Wales and Northern Territory, whether human rights law had anything to do with it. In this respect, he replied with a case that I should read, cases dealing with incarceration, particularly deportations and refugees, as well as criminal law cases, which could all shed light on the misuse of mental health and psychiatrists' powers. As you can imagine, the mere thought of mental health or psychiatrists stirs up deep righteous anger in me. It is virtually the sole reason I study law. Now, of course, except for New South Wales and Northern Territory, it isn't enough that a family member and psychiatrist labels a person to be harm to themselves or others. But consent, where the person is capable of giving it, is also required. A person may therefore refuse, though of course it is not a resolute decision and it can be overridden. The legal profession is very interesting in that it only deals with words. There is no need for field work. All the research can be done in a library or a screen. The content of judgments and legislation gets dissected, analyzed, debated. All this has nothing whatsoever to do with health, including Chinese herbal medicine, acupressure, qigong, other exercises, etc., or the medical sciences, or survival, including agriculture, cooking, finding the most suitable diet, and the innumerable and ever-changing bits of partial knowledge in those broad categories, etc. Lawyers are somewhat similar to composers, philosophers, mathematicians. Consider that the medical profession is bound up by a structure, a system which has ingrained in them a resolute subservience to static guidelines and toxic, useless pharmacology. Even the best of them wave away their ignorance and contempt of the patient and continue to preach, listen to the doctor, while applying the same treatment to all persons, regardless of individual characteristics and circumstances, fitting a wide variety of symptoms into one set category, and delivering the patients to the gates of hell much earlier than they would have reached it without the medical interventions. Their entire body of knowledge, right down to their research and peer review methods, are flawed from the patient's point of view, and of course from a neutral, godlike perspective. The profession itself cannot see their own flaws, which is just as well, since there are no alternatives to their system. There is, of course, Chinese herbal medicine, the only other evidence-based philosophy of medicine, which undertakes treatment in the complete opposite way of the dominant Western medicine. It has its own flaws too, most notably the questionable quality and safety of imported herbs from China. Indeed, had Western medical systems truly respected Chinese herbal medicine, then we would not be in a pandemic. Medicine costs would be slashed, public medical insurance would be reduced, pharmaceutical companies would all go insolvent. What appears complex would happen very easily. When used right, Chinese herbal medicine in combination with a strong underlying immune system would render SARS-CoV-2 a passing cold, not the evil killer it currently appears to be. Of course, most of us lack the strong underlying immune system, never mind the correct formula of Chinese herbal decoctions to drink. Nothing is clear-cut. The analysis of a single patient has hardly been completed with just numbers on a piece of paper, their so-called tests. The human body is ever-changing. What numbers there were an hour ago is no longer relevant now. And in any case, those numbers mean nothing to a TCM practitioner or a patient. Any treatment based on such numbers is also meaningless for a patient. There are instances where the highly concentrated compounds in the drugs. Chinese medicine considers most Western medicine to be cold-natured. Some are even described as evil. There are instances where those highly concentrated compounds hit the jackpot and meet the needs of a patient's body, usually the large Western male patient with much heat in their body. But for most patients, including cold, thin, Asian, female patients, it is a toxic poison, which the body must then work hard to expel. Never mind that the original purpose of the medicine is unfulfilled. It's just extra work for the already sick and tired body. Now, those large Western male patients with much heat are just as likely to be a full-time worker who needs a quick fix so they can go to work the very next day. So what should be universally toxic is quite suitable for their needs. On the other hand, herbal medicine may take longer to have effect. Some are instant, but most have a supportive mechanism, helping the body to heal itself on its own. Not toxic poisons on rampage, which must then be expelled by the body working hard. All the important organs getting damaged and weaker in the process. Western medicine has its merits. MRI is good. Physiotherapy is good. Nurses turning bodies is necessary to avoid pressure sores. Perhaps emergency treatment saves lives. But everything else, including CT scans, catheters, antibiotics, drugs, invasive treatments, must be avoided at all costs if one is intent on living a long and prosperous life, crucially, free of suffering. Never mind enjoying life. Being free from physical suffering such as that experienced by my mom, with diabetes, spinal cord injury, long-term side effects of intravenous dexamethasone, numbering too many, osteonecrosis, tennis elbow, occasional migraines ever since taking Valium prescribed by a doctor who should have been deregistered in 2017 for abusive behavior to another senior doctor, for spasms during spinal shock period but which caused hallucinations, all suffered in one go, constantly, 24/7. This is grandma's long years of suffering repeated with 10 times the force. And yet my behavior has not changed. Being free from physical suffering should be my aim. I'm currently so, and must remain so. If I fall, I must not have a fragile body, which easily allows my spinal cord to be shattered. Most of all, those who preach the myth of doctors as ultimate gods and saviors to be given the utmost respect now know that going to the hospital is to be avoided, sometimes at all costs. Go there, and you're in good hands. Good hands to send you to hell quicker for sure. Sometime recently, I was subdued on hearing that one of my Japanese grandfather's older sisters, who used to send delicious mandarins from her place to my grandfather, had passed away after falling from a hospital bed. My Japanese great-grandmother, also in Ehime-ken, fell one day and was reluctantly put into aged care hospital, but died at 106 not long after, in 2012. Near the end, her mind was no longer so clear. Contrastingly, my grandfather in Australia had a clear mind until the end, only taking his last breath after seeing his son, who also died shortly after, evidently taken away together. If my grandfather had had a clear mind and a proper outlook on life, he'd not have fought with grandmother, nor pursued a ridiculous court case. He'd have learned to live life properly. He wouldn't have forged your mom's signature or taken other people's money and invested it all into some random broker of shares, subsequently losing it all. He'd have spent that money on his son, keeping him off the streets, preventing him from having to sleep in toilets or otherwise face the harsh realities of homelessness. Once his son was able to secure accommodation on the condition that he was an orphan, yet along came both his parents to visit and he was kicked out. If my grandfather had not craved attention, he would not have gone to have random tests done on him. Several powerful x-rays later, he could no longer stand up on his own. He did survive in nursing homes for some time. However, the food there made visitors get diarrhea, and abuse of the elderly due to ageism was rampant. He wrote some words on a tissue paper which was left at the bottom of a tissue box. It stated something to the effect that some workers had verbally or physically abused him while showering. My grandfather's famous words, "If only we didn't have to eat." And anyway, he'd go and collect the church's free bread, and generally didn't live a high standard life, although of course these are just the negatives. My grandmother died in hospital, even though she had been recovering from her stroke and could eat again, without intubation, yet perhaps out of malice towards patients who recover on their own, or ageism again. At midnight one day she was sent off to hospital and was intubated again there. And this process proved fatal as it caused internal bleeding, and she was basically killed. If there were more evidence, a strong case could be brought before the courts. On the other hand, she'd already suffered so much, especially in the last years, that this story had to end somewhere. I digressed. The legal profession most likely has similar structural limitations to those which the medical profession suffers from. Being a student means that I can't see those. I know that these limitations are of less importance because they aren't a life or death matter, or impacting on a person's material quality of life, lifespan, enjoyment of life, recovery from illness, which is strongly hindered by Western medicine. But I still want to know what these limitations are. It's not something obvious like lack of equal access to justice or the coldness of the law, how it doesn't care how people interpret the words or how they misuse the law. Perhaps the history of law, or of jurisprudence, or the philosophy of law are the areas which may reveal these limitations. The law obviously deals with everything in society: politics, crime, banks, corporations, public order, marriage. In short, anything that exists can be regulated. But the biggest aspects of law deal with power and money. There are rich corporate lawyers or those in big law firms, and then there are lowly legal aid lawyers or criminal prosecutors and defense lawyers who evidently suffer a lot from the harsh confronting crimes they deal with daily. Learning the law meant learning to understand that the law and the courts are to be avoided at all costs. You'd be better off just living properly with what you have than to enter the court system. For this, of course, the problems must be avoided at all costs. That means one must stay well away from uneducated, unprincipled crackheads who might attempt to pour a kettle of hot water on you or destroy your glasses. And one must stay away from hospitals. Once in, their influence and control is too hard to resist. And if you agree to one thing, such as catheterization, everything else comes along, including preventative antibiotics. precautionary antibiotics. Although in Mum's case it was intravenous dexamethasone, a dangerous yet widely abused corticosteroid, which she refused but ultimately due to various nefarious tactics was coerced to accept. To have it intravenously is different from swallowing it orally. Also, given that her body was paralyzed at this time, that dexamethasone clearly caused a great degree of harm and hindrance to her body, which continued for months afterwards. That includes the HPA axis, cortisol-related adrenal insufficiency-related spasms throughout 2020. And of course, osteonecrosis, or vascular necrosis, which is a death sentence, meaning she will soon be unable to stand up. It brings to mind the way that club activities in Japan somewhat toughened me up and made things in Australia seem so easy, or that after witnessing and learning about the mental health incarceration process and its abuse, life just became completely different. Money meant nothing if liberty could be taken away by a deranged sibling. Sure, money can't buy a criminal out of jail, but still. Crime and misuse incarceration are on a wholly different level and are not to be considered together. I'm sure that workers in NGOs, UN organizations, and others who are on the line between life and death in war-torn countries would return home and feel so strange. They may label it PTSD, but it is simply that all the things that seem to matter, society's many categories, activities, work, leisure, education, and society's practices, hanging out with friends, laughing at jokes, fashion, making money, just seem altogether changed, foreign, inconceivable, and almost disgusting. But at some point they realize that this is just how it is on Earth. I was always easily frustrated from childhood if things didn't go my way, perhaps because everything was done to perfection for me by my mum, and I was accustomed to it. After witnessing false imprisonment / involuntary incarceration on mental health harm criteria grounds, a new factor entered: unjustified anger. Once in PE classes in Japan, I'd had a painful leg due to wrong stretching practices during karate lessons the evening before. I was hobbling, but then a classmate intentionally leaned against me. I'm unsure why. Perhaps it was an odd response to my hobbling, but in any case, I responded with such force, the speed with my entire body minus the leg, that he would have fallen if two other boys behind me had not caught him. The unjustified anger lay just beneath the surface. Being in Japan, it was easier to forget Sydney or Hornsby involuntary incarceration. I considered karate to be a significant boost to my sense of being able to do something. For example, I'd be able to see through things and be there to protect Mom instead of being lured away according to their plans. I might not have been able to defeat one male and one female police officer, or several paramedics, however. Yet it could have been possible to swiftly enable Mom to escape. It would have been an incredible action scene from the films, enacted in real life. It was unreal to that degree. Later, I returned to Adelaide, not Sydney, losing $90,000 through currency exchange, further disillusioning myself in regards to the nature of money by witnessing how easily money could be lost or gained, and how powerless and stupid my behavior had been. Around 2016, I responded to an arch-enemy of sorts who was digging into my shoes while climbing the stairs. After some other provocations from a friend, I threw a couple of plastic chairs around the classroom, about a 3-meter radius around where I was. Later in 2017, I became so enraged one day shortly after I discovered the New South Wales laws around involuntary incarceration and spoken to a casual art teacher about it. Then I went onto the balcony and threw F-words at the car fumes, at the chimney smoke, and at hell. And much to my surprise, just several minutes later, when I was settling down to finish a physics assignment, I saw a police car parked downstairs through the window. Evidently, the neighbor next door had called. I would later learn that F-words spoken and heard in public spaces constitutes an offense, often an excuse used in cases where Aboriginals are taken into custody. Of course, it was that neighbor who also created smoke, which would enter through the heating system, and who partied frequently and laughed shrilly and loudly outdoors, often creating noise which would bother us at night. But of course, such things are not an offense. And in any case, it is ironic that the one word I learned on coming to Australia, the F word, is banned. Having amazing people around you is better than having average people, at least for family, although it doesn't make much difference until one is disabled or requires services or is an employer faced with dunderhead employees.